welcome. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here with you today as part of the Awesome Marriage Seminar. I want to visit with you a little bit about why marriage isn't the only answer. And so if you're taking notes, I want you to write down this thought. And the thought is, by nature, we always want what we don't have. Think about it. We always want what we don't have. For some of you, that may be a job. You're in a job right now and it just feels like a dead end. You're not making enough money. And surely, if you could get that new job or you made more money, then that would make life just wonderful. For others, maybe you're a single mom and you got a bunch of kids and you're running around town taking them everywhere and you got a little compact car, right? And so you're cramming your little compact car full of things, the kids, car seats, sports, soccer balls, whatever it is, and all you really want is a minivan. If you could get a minivan, then you'd be able to fit all your kids and all your stuff in there. You'd even get one with the little drop-down screen with a DVD player, and that way they could stay entertained. And oh, just a minivan. If I had a minivan, that would be so awesome. I bet you thought you'd never say that. Or maybe it's where you live. Maybe it's your neighborhood. Maybe it's an apartment, and you got a little 600 square foot apartment. You know what? If you could just have a house. If I could just have a house and a backyard, I could get those pets I always wanted. I wouldn't be so lonely. Oh, if I just had a house. And this applies to relationships as well, right? I mean, all of us, we're here because we want an awesome marriage. All of us are here because we're looking for that perfect someone. We want someone to do life with so that we're not alone. And here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody wants an awesome marriage. I've been married 9 years. I want an awesome marriage. There's nothing wrong with that at all. As a matter of fact, we know that it was part of God's perfect design. If we look early in the Bible, in Genesis 2, verse 18, it says, the Lord God says, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." We know that marriage is right. There's nothing wrong with pursuing marriage. We all want someone to do life with. The problem is when we make marriage the only answer. When marriage is all we want and marriage is all that we need. I want to talk with you about a couple points that help illustrate this. The first one is this, if you're taking notes. When marriage is your answer, you compromise more than you should. When marriage is your answer, you compromise more than you should. To help illustrate this point, I want to go to a story in the Old Testament of the Bible, and let me just shape it for you. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but we've got a young man named Jacob, and Jacob has just been sent out by his father into a land, actually his uncle's land, to find a wife. And so Jacob goes out to find a wife, and back then it was part of culture that it was okay if you married someone in your family, probably not your brother or sister, but a distant cousin, was fair game. And so here goes Jacob, and he's off, and he's looking for his bride. And so he goes to his uncle's land, Uncle Laban, and he's talking with, or he goes up into his land with Uncle Laban, and he meets this girl at a well, and her name is Rachel, and she's absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. It's love at first sight. When Jacob sees Rachel, he says, "This is the one. She is all that I need to be happy. She's all I need." And so we'll pick up the story in Genesis 29, verse 18. Here's Jacob, and he goes to his uncle Laban, and he says, Jacob was in love with Rachel. And so he said, "I will work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel." In other words, he said, I will do anything for Rachel. I want her so bad. I'd work for 7 years. I don't know about you guys, but that's a long time, 7 years, to work for someone. Now, it was part of the culture where you would actually work for your bride. And so this wasn't so uncommon, but even so, maybe 2 years at most. 7 years, that's compromising more than you should. You know, I could think about that when I first met Allison, my wife. We were having a conversation, and we're talking about pets. And she's telling me she's a pet person, right? And I said, well, I am definitely not a pet person. And then we go on to get married, and we decide to compromise. And so we compromised, and we got 3 dogs and 4 cats. And at one point in time, we even had a litter of foster kittens. Great compromise, right? No, I was compromising more than I should. I was doing crazy things in the name of love. And many of you are saying, well, that's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's pets, yeah. I may not be a pet person either, but that's not that big of a deal. And I agree with you. But what if it looks like this? Maybe you're a young girl and you've met that guy. He's really cute and you just know he's the one. But he's pressuring you sexually. And he's pushing you to a place that you know it's not right and you don't necessarily want to go there, but your mind goes to the place of, well, maybe if I give him my body, maybe if I compromise and I do this thing and I give him my body, then he'll give me his heart. You're willing to compromise. Or maybe you're dating a jerk and you know what? You're almost 30 and all your friends are married and you're going, man, if I could just be married, I could hang out socially. Everybody who goes out, they always go out in couples and I'm always by myself. And you know what? It's okay that he's a jerk because if I marry this guy, maybe he'll change. I'm willing to compromise to get something that I feel like I need. That's what, when marriage is the answer, that's what it does. We compromise more than we should. Second point, if you're taking notes, when wrongly marriage is your answer, you tend to become very demanding. Let's go back to our story with Jacob. And he's at a point where he's worked these 7 years. Okay? He did his time. And so he goes to his uncle Laban again and he says, give me my wife. Genesis 29:21. Give me my wife. My time is completed and I want to lie with her. And that translation is actually more of an edited one. It's a little bit more crude than that. But he basically says this, hey, I earned her. She's mine. Give her to me. Okay, I demand that you deliver. I earned her. Gosh, if this won't just destroy a relationship. And I could think of times, even in my past, where that would be the case. And maybe it wasn't like, hey, give me my wife. I already had a wife. And I would come home from work, and I would start to demand things of her. I would been at work all day, and I come home tired, and I'm like, why is the house dirty? Why haven't you made dinner? And so what we do is instead of entering into this covenant where we lay down our lives for one another, what we do is we enter into this sort of marriage contract, right? Like if I do this, then you should do this. I'm doing my part, you do yours. And it can take shape in many different ways, and sometimes it's sexually, right, guys? You're like, hey, I watched that chick flick. I took you to that nice restaurant, right? So surely now I'm entitled, hey, let's get it on, right? And so you're pressuring and you're expecting things and you're demanding things of that special someone that you love because you feel like you've earned it. We become demanding. We compromise more than we should, and we become demanding. And the third point I want to leave you with today is when you think that marriage is the answer, you will always end up dissatisfied. Always. See, because we put such high expectations on that person. There are expectations that realistically, really no one can meet. Right? But we're expecting a great deal of them, and so ultimately what we're doing is we're setting up that person we claim to care about, for guaranteed failure. There's no way they can live up. And that's what's going on in our story in the Bible. And again, I'll catch you up, kind of paraphrasing here. But basically, Jacob goes to Laban and says, hey, my time has come. I put in the 7 years. I'm ready for Rachel that you promised me in exchange for what I did. Well, Laban actually had an older daughter, Rachel's sister, and her name is Leah. And the Bible describes her as having weak eyes, which a lot of Hebrew scholars believe that meant she wasn't very attractive. And so here's Uncle Laban, and he's got a problem on his hands. He's got an older daughter who's not married, who's not being pursued, who doesn't have anyone who's working 7 years for her. And culturally, really, she needs to be married before he can give away his younger daughter, Rachel. And so when you have this wedding ceremony, which Laban agreed to, he tells Jacob, okay, we'll do this deal. I promised you this. And so they have this wedding ceremony. It's much like weddings today. People are having a good time. They're partying, probably a lot of adult beverages. Okay, Jacob's probably had a few. And so what Laban does is he takes advantage of the situation and he approaches Leah and he says, Leah, here, your time has come. I've got this opportunity for you. Go into the wedding tent and seal the deal with Jacob he'll never know. And so let's pick up in verse 23. It says, but when evening came, Laban took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob. And Jacob lay with her. And then verse 25, when morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Right? He's coming into his senses. He's realizing, hey man, I've been hoodwinked here. I served you for Rachel, didn't I? That's what he says. I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? And here's the bottom line. Anytime we enter into marriage and we start to have high expectations that someone else is going to meet all of our needs, I'll tell you, every time we go to bed thinking we're going to bed with Rachel and we wake up with Leah, you'll be dissatisfied every time. And the tough part is, really when you think about it, that's the exact same thing that Leah did as well. Here's Leah. She's the older daughter. She's thinking, you know what, if only I can be married. If only I can be married. My younger sister shouldn't be married. I should be married. If only I can be married, then I'll have everything I need. And so what does she do? She agrees to a pretty ridiculous request to go in and pretend to be her sister in order to get married. And so she goes through with it. And then we pick up in verse 31. It says, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, it is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now. See, Leah compromised. And she took it upon herself to seek out that which she wanted most, which was marriage. And she realized that that wasn't enough. She was going to have to do something more, and she's still yearning for that love and affection from her husband. And so she's like, surely now that I've had a child, surely he will love me now. But ultimately, she's dissatisfied. See, when we make marriage the only answer, we're going to compromise more than we should. We're going to become demanding, and we're going to end up dissatisfied. And so many of you might be sitting there going, okay, well, what do I do? At the beginning of this, you told me that, hey, marriage is a good thing, right? It's part of God's ultimate plan, his perfect design. What do I do? Is it wrong for me to pursue marriage? And what I tell you is, no, it's absolutely not wrong for you to pursue marriage. It's just wrong for you to pursue marriage above everything else. See, we have to get our priorities in order. And without making God the priority, which you've heard a lot about in this seminar, without making God the one, it's almost impossible to find the two. And so I want to encourage you today that there are things you can do to help go down that path of finding the two. And it starts by making God the one. See, you have to decrease so that Christ can increase in your life. When you have Christ first, then it's easier to find that person that you're supposed to be with. It's easier to find that number two, that perfect someone. And this isn't just something I'm teaching on, it's something that just plays so true in my own marriage. You know, I've been married for 9 years, and it hasn't always been perfect. There was a lot of baggage that my wife and I brought into the marriage. Because see, I want to give you this point too, this last point. What I do before my marriage will ultimately impact my marriage. See, you can't go through life right now, whether you're dating or you're single, and you're partying and you're doing things and you're thinking, oh, well, this will all change when I get married. The truth is, no, it's not going to change when you get married. The things you do now will impact your marriage down the road. And so my wife and I entered into a marriage, and we had baggage. And a lot of these things, compromising, being demanding, being dissatisfied, they all came up and they were in play now. And so we struggled with these. And I'll tell you this, one thing I admire and just appreciate from my wife Allison so much is she had a choice to make several years ago. Am I going to do what I can to pursue an awesome marriage? And she said yes. And what she did was she didn't try to change me, and she didn't tell me all the things that I was doing wrong, and she didn't tell me all the things that I should be, and she didn't raise the expectations for me. No, instead what she did is she started to work on herself. See, we just talked about this. She told me, at that point in my life, Ryan, I realized that I was the one being selfish. I saw you as being selfish, but I was the one being selfish. Because we generally judge others by their actions, and we judge ourselves by our intentions. And so she saw me as being selfish, and what she did is she realized that God was asking her to start to put other people first in her life. And so for a full year, 365 days, my wife, Allison, vowed to put others first. Every day, she would find one opportunity or the other to put someone else first in her life. And here's what it did. It started to change her. She grew closer to God. And as she grew closer to God, I started to notice, right? Because we judge others by their actions, not just their intentions. And so I started to see this change in her. And she's growing in this creation in Christ, and she's being more Christ-like. And that's attractive, okay? And I couldn't help but notice. And so I started to want to get involved. And I became more interested, and I'm like, what are you doing? What can I do? What can I do to grow closer to God? Because I want more of what you have. I want that too. And so what happened is kind of the domino effect. I started to do things too for other people. I started to get involved. I started to encourage her. I started to be the better husband, that perfect someone. And it wasn't because she was trying to change me. It was because I was trying to be more like Christ as well. I was trying to pursue the things that He had for me. And in doing so, both of us have our eyes on God, and we're focused on Him. And slowly He started to bring us closer together. And it was one of the most powerful things in our relationship. And it's the reason I can sit here today and tell you and encourage you that there is the possibility to have an awesome marriage. The thing is, you've got to get your priorities straight. And you got to put God in His rightful position as number one, Lord of your life. And then you'll find that number two who will complement you in your pursuit for Him.